Hello, hello. Okay. Yeah, so a very warm welcome to all of you to our event today about the role of Islamic finance in the global climate finance landscape. This event is initiated by the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, and I'm from the UNEP DTU partnership, and will be moderating today. And let me also introduce you to our two distinguished speakers. So we have Burak Saygil, who is with the Turkish Industrial Development Bank, and they really have a fascinating showcase project how Islamic finance can enable renewable energies and energy efficiency. And yeah, in his case, it's more called renewable energy and energy efficiency, and it doesn't even say a big label climate change all over the place. And we'll see how that how that happens. And our second distinguished speaker, Abdulatif Bello, from the Economic Division of the Islamic Development Bank, so hosting us here. Thank you very much for this wonderful room. And he will also show us a bit more of the big picture of Green Sukuk, and we'll see in your presentation. So, and I will begin just showing you where this comes from, why we are having this conversation, and how it was initiated. So my own presentation will really be a shorter one coming from the climate finance space. So I personally know comparatively little about Islamic finance, and the whole idea of having this event came up in a conversation with a good friend who is an Islamic finance expert. And I myself really come from the Green Climate Fund, World Bank type of climate finance initiatives. So, well, and one thing I realized is that when I look into the reports that I typically read, so what the World Bank publishes on climate finance, what the OECD publishes, what the Climate Policy Initiative publishes, even if I just, I search in my computer for the word Islamic in the report, and the word just is not there. But then on the other hand, there's this gigantic field of Islamic finance, and it's one of the fastest growing fields in finance globally. But if I go into Islamic finance reports, there's a lot of talk about green and renewable energy and energy efficiency, but the word climate change, in some of them I couldn't find it. So, and I think we really need to have that conversation, just given how, well, on the one hand, how much financial resources there are in the Islamic space, but then also how many people and how many countries would actually prefer to have Islamic finance compared to the more Western World Bank type of finance. Yeah, so this is really where I'm coming from, and my interest in the field is in. So my job is basically to help developing countries access finance and structure their financial deals in a way that they can use Western donor finance and leverage more national finance and really fulfill their INDC pledges. And often that is difficult, and we need domestic sources, we need private sector sources, we need all kinds of sources of finance that we can get because, well, as you all are aware, I believe there is a huge gap between where we want to be and where we are at the moment in terms of climate finance and in terms of the growth in renewable energies. So Islamic finance, with the growth rate of 10% per year, or even more than 10% per year in the last couple of years, is a really interesting candidate. And then and I believe most people in this room know much more about the details on those rules than I do. But you have, if I understand correctly, the Islamic structures and rules of the game are that conservation of nature is actually a really important goal. So that's already built into the system to some way. So that makes it also a natural candidate for climate finance. And I just wanted also to show you some numbers of where I'm coming from. So we are trying to help countries access finance for their mitigation actions. And there's really a huge gap between the donors and the recipients at the moment. So we see a lot of countries and also implementers in countries who express, yes, we have all these great ideas and great projects, but we can't find money for them. But then if you look at the donors have an issue finding enough projects that they want to finance and finding projects that fulfill their criteria. So the upper graphic is from the UNFCCC NAMA registry. So if you put in a nationally appropriate mitigation action in that registry, you can also add, okay, we request financial support for this. And less than 3% of all the financial resources requested in the registry have actually been given. So there's a lot of ideas that don't receive finance. Also on the lower one is the Green Climate Fund, which is it's currently not yet the biggest, but it's going to be one of the most important channels for climate finance. And they are also struggling to get their money out of the door. So in the first year, they had a total of more than $900 million that they wanted to allocate to projects. But in the end, they could only fund about $170 million worth of projects, simply because they didn't have the proposals on their desks that they needed to see. Well, and one big issue that the donors want to see and need to see in their proposals is that they leverage co-financing. So the donor only gives a part of the money, and then there's other sources that come together to bring about a really large and transformational project. Yeah, and this is one slide that we see a lot when we talk about climate finance. It's from the Climate Policy Initiative. And I'm well aware that it's in small writing, so you can't really read it. But what's really making me wonder here is when I look at this part here, and that's the financial instruments. And when you look at the details there, almost everything is financed by debt. And there's a little bit of equity and a little bit of risk-sharing instruments, but it's really, really small compared to the debt part. And yeah, so there, at least in this reporting on climate finance, the Islamic world shrinks to a tiny little line. And I do believe, for example, the project by the Turkish Development Bank never entered that report because it didn't have climate change printed all over it in big letters. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's, to round this up with a story on the Green Climate Fund, I work a lot with, teaching in country, working with the national governments to help them and support them to develop their proposals to the Green Climate Fund. And this was an experience in Jordan where I explained that one of the requirements is, you can't just apply for a grant, you have to use other instruments. And if you do renewable energies, yes, you can also finance them by loans, so you should consider that. And I got a very clear answer, no, we don't want any loans. Loans are not acceptable for Jordan anymore. Well, so I asked them if Islamic finance would be an option, and yes, it would be. So that really that really started my interest in this sector, right? That I need to understand how Islamic finance works, how we can use the GCF to leverage Islamic finance to make these things happen. So, and this is from the Green Climate Fund homepage. And again, you have the distribution of the projects they approved so far in terms of financial instruments. The first row is grants and loans, and as you see, it's 41% and 46%, so it's almost everything is grants and loans. But what is interesting is this part down here. So they do offer equity and they do offer guarantees as well. So these instruments, I believe, could be used to leverage Islamic finance on a larger scale. And and that's already coming to the end of my presentation. And Abdullah, who is with the Islamic Development Bank and our host, they are working on accreditation for the GCF, and yeah, we'll see where we can take it from here. And maybe guarantees can help you. Maybe you find other ways to finance it. But I really think we need this conversation. So thank you, Abdullah. Abdullah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salatu wa salam ala Rasul Kareem. Let me welcome you to this section. Just try to clear some issues. Before coming to this meeting in Marrakesh, we at Islamic Development Bank prepared 7 different publications, and one of them is about the role of Islamic finance in financing climate change. So these 7 documents will be launched officially on the 15th of November. We do have a series of copies of the document outside if you want to pick one. So by the time we finish, I do hope the publication will be all over the world in Google, so that when you search Google, when you Google, you'll be able to find this document there. So let me move quickly to my presentation. We are here today to discuss the role of Islamic finance in climate change financing. Where does climate change fit in the whole equation? If you recall, last September in, in New York in 2015, we had this SDG that was signed on by many heads of state. It has 17 goals. And if you look through, it is divided into 3 major themes. You have supporting inclusive growth, enhancing access to basic services, and the third component is promoting environmental sustainability. There are 5 goals put together under promoting environmental sustainability. And one of them has a focus on climate change. It is the one in the middle. It's written here, we need to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. So many countries sign on to this SDG, and the goals have to be implemented. I'm happy to note that many countries also prepare their climate action plan. So within the action plan cover mitigation, adaptation, and the dual benefit. So I will not go to the detail, but just a background why we are discussing this issue. The climate change is part of international initiative, and that's why we are here today in Marrakesh to follow up on the Paris Climate Agreement reached in 2015 December. Before this, okay. There's a new report that came out 2 weeks ago, new economy report. It came out with a rough estimate. Let me go back to this, sorry. How do I move back? It's not moving. Eh? I want to move back. What do I do? Yeah, if you look at the source of this document, the title is the source of this graph, New Climate Economy 2016 report. It was released about 2 weeks ago. The report further stated that we need $90 trillion is needed in infrastructure globally over the next 15 years to combat climate change. It's a huge resources. It went further to say there must be investment priority on low-carbon, climate-resilient development as well as energy-efficient projects. But to do so, there must be differentiated infrastructure challenges between developed and developing countries. The requirements of developed countries in terms of infrastructure are different from those of developing countries. Mostly developed countries need to repair the existing infrastructure. But developing countries, they need to start from the scratch to build new roads, new dams, new infrastructure to meet the modern requirement. Now, the question there is, where do we mobilize this $90 trillion? We need finance and investment from all sources, anywhere the money can come from, both from private, from Islamic finance, for what have you. That's where we fit in. This is how Islamic finance come to complement the existing modes of financing. Now, I mentioned to you that a report focused on 90 trillion, but there's another report before that, which was prepared. You see, the period given here is 2010 to 2030. The one I mentioned to you was released 2 weeks ago. It was 90 trillion. This report is saying investment that is needed to green agriculture, telecommunication, all the major sectors of the economy. The figures are stated here. For agriculture, we need 125 billion. But per year, between 2010 and 2030, we need $5 trillion to green each of these economic sectors. If you look at the extreme hand here, you have additional investment required in a green growth scenario. Our focus now going forward is how to transition from our conventional growth to green growth. And when we say green growth, there are two things that come on board: low carbon development and climate resilient development pathways. So we have these two together form green growth model. So for green growth model, we need building and industries that will cost us 331 billion. Within this, the breakdown is as follows: forestry 40 billion, energy 139, transport vehicles 187 billion. So this is the breakdown of another scenario. The first scenario you saw was 90 trillion. And that scenario, the first scenario was from 2016 to 2030. This is a new scenario from 2010 to 2030. So we have different sources giving us different scenarios. Now, where does Islamic finance plays an important role? It offers alternative and complementary approach to addressing infrastructure financing gap to fight climate change. Islamic finance also appeals to broader communities, including non-Muslims, owing to its modus operandi. Islamic finance system is ethical. It ensures that financial transactions are linked to the real economy. It promotes financial stability and also long-term sustainability. These are the key features of Islamic finance. Totally, the global outlook of Islamic financial services is about 2.1 trillion at the end of 2015, according to Global Islamic Financial Report 2016. In recent time, we have seen slow in growth of this Islamic finance. It used to be 2 digits. Now it's single digit in the last 2 years. In 2014, it was 9.3% growth. In 2015, it was reduced by 2 percentage points, 7.3%. Now, this is an overview of where we stand as of 2015. The first row you see there is the potential of the Islamic financial industry. It has very strong potential of reaching 7 trillion by the end of 2015. But actually, we were able to observe 2.1 trillion by the end of 2015. You can see the gap. The potential gap is about $5 trillion. The growth, as I've mentioned to you, has been declining from 2011, when the growth was 19%. It fell down to 2012. It went a bit to 2012, and from there, it has been slowing. The latest figure we have is 7.3 growth in 2015. On the average, between 2009 and 2015, we have 15% per year. Now, the last row you see here is the catch-up. Based on 10 years growth in potentials, we need about 27% growth. You can see we are now 15% per year from 2009 to 2015. We expect to have 27% to be able to catch up, to meet the potential. Now, because we're talking about climate change, I'll focus on the instrument that is very important to climate change. And the main instrument is the Sukuk, or Islamic bond. What is it? Sukuk are Sharia-compliant security backed by a specific pool of assets. It can be used to fund green projects such as clean energy, mass transit, water conservation, forestry, and low-carbon technologies. So all this put together, we can use green Sukuk. Well, as you can see here, it's now increasingly being used to fund projects that can help countries adapt to and mitigate climate change, while giving investors fixed income investment opportunities that have a positive impact. We also notice that green bonds are a growing investment opportunities and funding tools for sustainable infrastructure. In 2012, a Green Sukuk working group was established by the Climate Bond Initiative. There were 4 institutions that came together to see how to support Green Sukuk. So there was a working group, global Green Sukuk working group, established by these 4 institutions. The mandate of this group is to identify green energy projects that fall under Sharia compliant categories for potential investors. So to really beside this Green Sukuk working group, we have another, standard, climate bond standard certificate that helps investors to identify eligible assets for Green Sukuk. So we have the working group, and then we have another, certification body called Climate Bond Standard Certification. So let me show you, in recent years, let me show you the activities of these certification climate bond initiatives. These are from February 2016 up to October 2016. These are all projects that were bonds that were certified by this initiative. And they are all from different parts of the world. You can see this row here from France, India, Australia, Netherlands. Mostly these are non-member countries. You can see the growth of Islamic, Green Sukuk. Now, there has been a sharp increase in issuances of Green Sukuk as more institutions try to tap on the green bond market. The green bond market has some 130 billion, as of today. As of July 2016, the green bond market reached 130 billion of debt outstanding. And you can see from the graph, which represents 0.15 of the total global fixed income market as of a report that was released 2 weeks ago by BlackRock institution. Now look, this is the outlook of the 130 billion in terms of rating. You can see the first column there. Majority of them are AA, AAA rated. Others are AA, and then you can see the last column. Some of them are not rated. So this is the global outlook, and most of them are government-supported Green Sukuk. So conclusion, sorry. I need to go back. Okay. You can see that there's a growing interest in Green Sukuk, in green bond, which means Green Sukuk will really go a long way to contribute to financing the $90 trillion of global infrastructure needed by 2030 to tackle climate change. There's a strong and great opportunity to explore Green Sukuk from Islamic finance dimension. To do that, we need also to review the legal framework in many countries to allow Sukuk to operate. These are the 2 essential conclusions I want to draw from this presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Abdullah, for your great overview of the bigger picture in Islamic finance. And I would now like to ask Burak for his presentation, and he will give us an insight on an actual case where the Turkish Industrial Development Bank used Islamic finance to, in a climate change context. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tim. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank IDB and also UNEP DTU partnership for inviting us for this panel. And before delving into our IDB partnership cooperation, I would like to give some brief information about Industrial Development Bank of Turkey, as TSKB. I was going to mention as TSKB. And we are a privately owned development bank with public and private mission. And our main shareholder is İşbank Group. 50% of our shares belongs to İşbank, and 9% of them belongs to Vakıf Bank, and the other rest is free float. We are working with most of the DFIs around the world, including, as you might imagine, IDB, And other DFIs that we are working with includes World Bank, EIB, EBRD, IFC, Australian Development Bank, European Investment Fund, AFD, KfW, and JBIC. What do? We provide financing, sustainable financing. We provide financing for the sustainable investments in Turkey. And before delving into IDB's cooperation, I would like to just mention about the sustainability journey of Turkey. It all started in 1980s. On the environmental factor and credit evolution process, and in 2005 it gains momentum with the environmental management system, and in the following years it goes with ISO certificates and also GRI approved sustainability reports and also global compact reports. In the last years we founded our sustainability committee and also published our global compact report, and also we were listed in Borsa Istanbul Sustainability Index. As Abdulatif Bey mentioned, this year also we issued a green bond, and we received a Green Deal of the Year in the EMEA region. It was a $300 million bond with a 5 years tenor. And also we were shortlisted with Apple, Starbucks on the innovative side of this award. And what we do in renewable energy investments, we are working in the renewable energy field in the last 12 years. And total financing committed to this sector is $3.1 billion, and the total investment cost is around $8.2 billion. And we provided financing for 167 renewable energy investments, 84 of it hydraulic power plants, 20 wind projects, 50 solar, 7 geothermal, and lastly 6 biomass projects. And the total generation capacity of these projects is around 4,222 megawatts, and this corresponds to the 13% of Turkey's renewable installed energy capacity. On the energy efficiency side, we are working in the energy efficiency part in the last 7 years, and we provided over $493 million to the 73 projects of the 45 companies. And the total energy savings that is achieved from these investments is an equivalent of the annual heating consumption of 350,000 households. And as you can see in here, the sectors that we provided financing in the energy efficiency is steel, cement, plastics, petrochemicals, and automotive sectors. When we come to the relationship with IDB, it all started in 1980s with the intermediation of equity participation in private sector companies. We were intermediating IDB in that regard. And in 2010, we started the search for an applicable financial model. And in 2012, we reached an agreement of applicability of restricted mudaraba. And we signed the agreement on 4th of December 2012. And the themes of these agreement is renewable energy and energy efficiency. And after that, we signed as it also this agreement, IDB Restricted Mudaraba 1, was introduced in the annual meeting in Jakarta as a success story. And we signed the second Restricted Mudaraba agreement on 2013. The first one was, in terms of size, is $100 million. Second one is like $220 million. And today our work progressed in 2 channels. First one is identifying a plausible financial model and also finding companies that will benefit from these IDB's funds. What did we do with the IDB-1? The size of this facility is like 100 million US dollars. We financed 2 hydropower plants, 1 wind power plant, 1 solar power plant, and 6 energy efficiency projects. And the impacts that we gained from these investments are like total investment capacity of the plants is like 370 megawatts. And annual carbon reduction is like 1 million tons equivalent. And total fixed project cost of all of these projects is like 641 million US dollars. And the annual energy savings is like 270 gigawatt hours per annum. In the second financing agreement that we signed with IDB, which is in terms of size 220 million US dollars, we financed 1 hydropower, 5 wind power, and 5 energy efficiency investments. And the major impacts that we gained from these investments is like the total installed capacity is like 489 megawatts. Annual carbon emission reduction is like 1.7 million tons equivalent, and total project cost is like 1 billion US dollars, and the annual energy savings is like 1,338 gigawatt hours. And to sum up, I would like to thanks to Turkish Treasury as well, because he is the guarantor of these facilities, and without their contribution it won't be happening. And also IDB about their flexibility and the broader conceptualization of the facility, and it enables us to get the broader vision of sustainability under a single financing facility. And we believe that the cooperation of IDB is the key issue to us address the sustainability matters, and we are looking forward to enhance this cooperation. Thank you very much for your listening, and this is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Burak, for your presentation. And I'm glad to admit that these two guys just proved me completely wrong when it came to Islamic and climate finance, because they are doing it already. We just, in the official climate finance world, we don't have it as much on our radar as we should. So, and I have a few questions for them myself, but I actually would prefer to give the audience the floor first. So, please, if there are any questions or comments. And, yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm Dr. Ibrahim from Iraq. I just have one question. Most of our Islamic countries, it's developing countries, and we're thinking about adaptation more than mitigation. So, what's the Islamic finance do with this subject? Thank you.
So, in adaptation, I mean, one thing, there's a big difference between mitigation and adaptation finance, obviously. And mitigation finance is, in a way, it has been around for a long time. We have decades of experiences in renewable energies. And in adaptation, we are just finding out what we are doing in some way. So, and I can tell it to you from the Green Climate Fund perspective, and from the, let's say, UNFCCC type of climate finance, and their adaptation is very much driven by grants. So it's not finance in the sense of a sukuk where there's some kind of return, and also the scalability into the trillions. We don't really have that in adaptation yet. There may be some sectors in agriculture where it's actually profitable investments that also are adaptation, but a lot is resilient infrastructure. Like building a dam is never profitable. It's just protecting from a catastrophe. So, for example, there's a large infrastructure project in Bangladesh by KfW now, but that is entirely grant financed for the infrastructure. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for this question. I will not see all our member countries purely into adaptation more than mitigation. We know when we talk about mitigation, the cost implication is very high. Adaptation depending on how exposed some countries are into certain sectors. So before we generalize, I think we need to look at the national climate plan of individual countries and then sum up to be able to see whether they are more into adaptation than mitigation. I would not want to speculate because I'm not too sure we have any concrete evidence to back this up. But I would rather say it all depends on the interests of individual countries and the level of development, because the cost involved in mitigation is so high. If you look at the figures team presented, there was a schematic something there. Adaptation was just 25 billion compared to 371 mitigation. So if you look at the breakdown of these two figures, it varies from developed and developing countries. So if you look at the Islamic world you talk about, most of them are developing countries. So the fact that they are developing, the requirement will be huge compared to developed countries. So I agree with you, either adaptation and mitigation, most of our member countries or most of Islamic world will be more, there will be more demand for support for both adaptation and mitigation. But it's worth studying this further to see the characterization of our member countries in terms of adaptation and mitigation. Thank you.
So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. One is a comment, and then I have a question. I think the comment is in relation to the question from our brother Iraq. The Islamic Development Bank, where I work in the agriculture sector, we are investing in a lot of integrated projects through value chains that are enhancing the adaptations of farmers to climate change and climate variability. On the input side, improved seeds, fertilizers, integrated soil fertility management, in irrigation, output side, we have market access interventions. So when you add up our investments in agriculture, there's a group, it's about, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Bello, it's about 10 billion already in that space. So that I think needs to be part of the equation in terms of accounting. So there is investment going on, and that should be increased much more, and I think the bank is committed to growing that space over the years. Right now we're doing about 1 billion a year. Over the next 10 years, the bank is likely to do 2 billion investments per year in the agriculture sector. My question is to Dr. Bello. You mentioned I may be wrong, there's a decline over the years in growth in general in the Islamic financing. Could you mention what are the reasons for that decline, which is quite significant in this space of financing?
Well, as I Okay, if you look at the table. Hello? Yeah, if you look at the table I showed you, we have the potential growth of Islamic finance. We were expecting this to be around 7 trillion by the end of 2015. But for one reason or the other, we saw it around 2 points. So the gap is about 5 billion. Well, it is difficult to say specifically what are the reasons because there are many factors. We cannot say this will continue. If you look at the major participants in terms of Islamic finance, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia. These are the 3 countries that are really doing well in terms of Islamic banking and financing. They're on top. These are the 3 top countries. In recent time, you notice that one of the countries was undergoing sanction, Iran. And then we saw also in some of these other countries, economic downtown, we saw slowdown in growth that could also affect the growth of Islamic finance. So you have to look at the whole economy of a country to be able to tell that there are some signals here that indicate that the slow growth in Islamic finance is as a result of the economic slowdown in some of these countries. Thank you.
So, do we have more comments or questions? Please feel free to speak your mind. This is also, this is also very, very open. You can just throw in ideas, that even if they're not very elaborate. So. Well, then maybe I have to throw in one of my own ideas that are not that elaborate. And it's one thing it's just one possible way forward to bring together the Islamic finance world and what we normally call the regular climate finance. And maybe one thing we could think about is to request the kind of readiness or the CTCN type of support to develop Islamic investment opportunities in a country like Iran, for example. So one thing that the Green Climate Fund is offering and also the other financial institutions under the UNFCCC offer is this readiness or initial support. And maybe that can be used to find a way where we can use a Green Climate Fund guarantee, for example, to help the Islamic Development Bank to make a big project like the Turkish one and make that happen in another less developed Islamic country as one potential way. So.
Well, I can see that there is a growing convergence between Islamic green sukuk and the conventional green sukuk. And this is taking place because we saw investors gradually moving towards socially responsible investment. If you look, there is a MCI, chart. I was looking at one recently. They had one on MCI regular and MCI low carbon. And you look at the returns, they are so close. Even in certain areas, the MCI low carbon index is performing better. So we are seeing general movement in terms of people who are conscious of the impact of the need for everybody to go for low carbon economic development and so on and so forth. So investors are also worried about the impact of the COP, rising, warming, the global warming and so on and so forth. So we are seeing a gradual pattern in investors moving to socially responsible investment. And when you talk about global social investment, it's just so close to Islamic finance because in Islamic finance, we ensure that anything prohibitive from Islamic dimension, there's no investment going into that, like alcohol, ammunition, and so on, that are inimical to the health or survivability of individual. So, because of the growth in socially socially responsible investment, I'm very optimistic that there's likely be a convergence between Islamic sukuk and green sukuk project going forward.
maybe, so we have about half an hour left, but I think there's no harm in closing early. So I would ask for a closing statement from you. And from my side, oh no, we have one more comment, so we continue. Thank you.
Just one question for a colleague from the bank. I was curious to know why there are no investments in the area of agriculture. For example, insurance schemes, takaful or other insurance schemes that would be supported under Islamic sukuk. Is there no interest in that in Turkey, companies that could offer insurance schemes against drought or floods or diseases or things that are a threat to production of farms? Why no investment in that area, which is of interest to us?
Thank you very much for the question. The agreement that we signed with IDB is basically consists of energy efficiency investments and renewable energy investments. And in that regard, there were no sectors in this perspective in the agriculture, so there were no investments in that part. That's because of the agreement that we signed with IDB. It's called restricted mudaraba, and in the agreement there is no special sector that we can finance.
And Burak is also from the Industrial Development Bank. So, yeah. Did you? Yeah, so looking at the audience, I think I'll come back to the closing statements anyway. Is that okay? Yeah. So, I go last.
If we look at the climate change imperatives, there are certain key pillars that will be of interest to IDB and countries. One is the finance. We have been providing finance and we will continue to provide finance to support our member countries where needed. The second imperative is capacity building and knowledge. Countries, money is not enough. Countries also need the capacity. When technologies are developed, they need this technology needs to be transferred. So we need to help countries in developing their skills in how to use these technologies and how to move forward. So the second imperative is capacity and knowledge sharing. The third element I see here is partnership. No country or development institution can do this alone. When innovation is developed somewhere, we need partnership to support the innovation, to share knowledge, and then co-finance some of these smart technologies. They require huge resources. So I believe in the long run, Sukuk bond, Islamic green Sukuk will eventually have significant contribution to the $90 trillion required to fill the financing gap to tackle climate change going forward. So we call on the international community to look into Islamic finance as alternative and complementary system that could really support and then bridge the financing gap for tackling not only climate change, all international challenges that we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting again for this wonderful event. And I would like to say that our cooperation with IDB will go on in the following years, and we can provide financing in the sustainable investments with the Islamic funds. And thank you very much again.
Oh, there's one more question from Iraq. Then you're most welcome.
Sorry to come back again. Just suggestion. in our countries, I mean Islamic countries, the building capacity is very important issue. So I suggest for IDB or your bank to maybe help some people from these countries to achieve MSc or PhD on climate change, on green industries or something like that may help the countries, the people, climate, and the bank. It's like small grants for students from Islamic countries to achieve and degrees in climate change, because climate change awareness should be very important. Thank you so much.
That is actually a very nice nice lead for me, because I also want to thank again the Climate and Clean Air Coalition for initiating this event, and in particular my absent colleague Yakbun Gorgos, who has a degree in climate change and is working at the United Nations Environmental Programme with a deep understanding of Islamic finance. So yeah, my big thanks to the absent friends. And maybe just as a closing word from my side, so having no relation to Islam in my own personal life, I don't have any religious motivation to look at Islamic finance. But I come there from a purely analytic, economical perspective, and I still think it's an amazing tool, and it's perfectly suitable for the challenges of climate change. So I really believe this dialogue and intense collaboration between the more Western-driven, more what we call traditional climate finance approach and ISDB, and also the Islamic countries, needs to happen urgently. So thank you very much again. And